talking to Professor John Cooley from UConn about his area of expertise, cicadas, because if you haven't really thought about them recently in the last few years, you're about to hear a lot about them. So, Professor, first of all, let me just ask you first about why this became such an area of interest for you.
Well, I do get asked that question a lot, and I actually grew up in an area that did not have periodical cicadas.
Huh.
So I didn't actually see an emergence until I was at college. But I did grow up in a part of the world. I grew up in Kansas City, where we have an awful lot of the summer cicadas. And I sure loved those as a kid, and I've had a lifelong love for cicadas.
For cicadas. It's interesting every once in a while, I think, especially when something happens when you're a child. I remember here in New England, there being a huge gypsy moth explosion one summer of my childhood, and they were covering the back of our house. And it was, kind of, gave people, the willies looking at those. But tell us about...
Gypsy moths are special in a different way.
Yeah, they are. They are. But back to the fact that cicadas are about to emerge in incredible numbers. This is why this has sort of captured people's imagination. It's very much a hot topic online. People are Googling it. So this is something we haven't seen in decades and perhaps even centuries.
Well,
why do you think this cicada-geddon is about to emerge?
Well, yeah, yes and no. So we have to sort of put ourselves in perspective here.
Yeah.
I think, and I do get asked this question a lot, why do we get so much about it this year? I think part of it is that we're actually we're opening up the newspaper or the browser or whatever it is we do these days and looking at the news, and there are a lot of stories out there that are not feel-good sorts of stories, shall we say. And so people are looking for interesting natural history stories that we can all get behind. So we saw a lot of interest in the eclipse.
Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't the only eclipse. We have them. But we saw a lot of interest in that eclipse. We actually had an earthquake out here in the East Coast a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
That got a lot of news interest. And I think the cicadas garner a lot of news interest for the same reason. If you remember, we had a large cicada emergence of periodical cicadas in 2021. That was brood 10. And for any location in the eastern U.S., it's just going to be like a normal brood emergence year because we do have two broods emerging this year, but they don't really overlap. What's special is that, it's a year with two broods coming out. That doesn't happen all that often. There are two life cycles, 13 and 17 years. Right. So they have kind of a complicated dance around time. Last time we had two broods of the different life cycles out in the same year was 2015. What's also kind of special about this year is the two broods are adjacent to each other, and that was not true in 2015.
Right.
So you can just drive right the way across the whole thing and you'll never be out of cicadas.
Right.
And these particular broods haven't done this for 221 years.
Wow.
There's a lot of sort of superlatives associated with this. Another thing that's been hitting the news stories is the numbers of cicadas that are going to be out. And clearly
let's go back. Let me just ask you back. Why the double brood? And why did this happen 221 years ago? And why would it be happening again now?
Yeah. So, and again, I don't think I led into that very well, but the periodical cicadas have two life cycles, 13 and 17 years. And so you get pretty complicated relations between the 13 and 17-year broods. In any 221-year cycle, any given 13-year brood is going to co-emerge with one of the 17-year broods somewhere.
It's kind of like an eclipse. They're going
but rarer.
Yes,
many of these broods aren't really anywhere near each other. So they're far apart because the degrees of latitude that are involved here from the south to the north, they're sometimes separated in time. What's special about this year is that we have a 13-year brood, brood 19, and a 17-year brood, brood 13, just to keep you all on your toes. They're co-emerging and they're adjacent. So you can just drive right through them.
Wow. And so
experience.
As I understand it, this year, this might affect the Midwest and southern states and more New England next year. Is that?
Well, New England. So the different broods are in different regions. And so brood 19, the 13-year brood that's out this year, is the biggest one of them all. And so it goes everywhere from Maryland all the way down, not all the way to the Gulf Coast because you run out of the right kind of forest, but it goes all the way as far down as you get the right sorts of trees. And then it goes out to Oklahoma, Arkansas, and all the way up to within 75 miles of Chicago's Loop in
Wow.
kind of a big crescent shape
Right.
through the eastern part of the U.S. The 17-year brood coming out this year, brood 13, is actually one of the smaller ones. That's just kind of a northern Illinois, Wisconsin sort of a thing.
So this isn't something people in New England are going to be concerned about this year.
Not this year.
Not this year, but next year.
but there are so many broods of periodical cicadas.
Yeah.
So next year we get a true interesting thing that's going to happen, and that is we get one of the broods that makes it into New England. There are two that make it out here. One of them is brood 2 that was out a couple of years ago. The other is brood 14, and brood 14 is odd because it's found on Long Island, and it's also found on Cape Cod.
You know what? We're going to take a quick break talking with Professor John Cooley about the emergence of cicadas. We'll take a quick break as he takes care of some business, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back. We're speaking with Professor John Cooley from UConn about the emergence of cicadas this year and next year. And we were just talking about how the fact that the cicadas that will come to the Northeast are in Long Island and Cape Cod.
Yeah. So this year is not going to be a great year for cicada watchers out here in New England and the Northeast. We do have 2 broods of periodical cicadas that we find in our region. One of them was brood 2 that was out a couple of years ago, and the other is brood 14, which is going to emerge in 2025. And brood 14 is interesting because it's found in some pretty unlikely places. Periodical cicadas like forests with deep forest soils, deciduous forests, and
So it's unusual for these to be attracted to a sandy place.
So yeah, these are found out on Long Island and also on Cape Cod, which are sandy. And so they're kind of an oddity in that respect. They're also an oddity in that when you look at all the information about periodical cicadas, you'll hear that there are often multiple species present and so forth and so on. Not the case for brood 14 in our region.
Interesting.
You're just going to find one species in those emergences, and that is Magicicada septendecim.
Say it with me. We always think about the noise that they make. So is it their feet? Are they rubbing their little hind legs together? Where does the cicada sound come from?
They actually have special sound producing organs on their abdomens. And one of the things to keep in mind is that when you hear them, you're only hearing half, because only the males have these sound producing organs. The females do not. They can make sounds, but they can't make loud sounds like this. They make sounds by clicking their wings.
Interesting.
So that sound is made with these special organs. The abdomen is a hollow amplifier, and that just amplifies the sound and radiates it out.
Wow, but what's actually creating the sound?
So if you look very closely at the cicadas, you'll see on the first abdominal segments, there are 2 whitish membranes. They look like ridged potato chips, and they're very thin, and they're set into a frame, and the cicada can put that frame under tension with a very strong pair of muscles. And the way that tension on the frame is released is by vibrating that little membrane.
Interesting. And so is that how birds know they're there?
Well, I mean,
like
that and the other tells the fact there's insects everywhere.
Right,
I mean,
exactly. Well,
not hard to find them.
Let's talk about that. You know, everything is inextricably linked, of course. What is the role the cicada plays in the food chain that is so crucial for birds?
So, well, there's a couple of things that are going on here. Cicadas, we have lots of different species of cicadas. Very few of them actually do this and are periodical. And, you know, as scientists, we think less about the role as how these function in their ecosystem. And what happens when the periodical cicadas come out is they tend to overwhelm things with their numbers. And so one of the odd things that goes on, first of all, they're moving nutrients from below ground to above ground, but they're also changing the predation dynamics for other insects. When the periodical cicadas come out, it's a great year to be another insect because the birds have all these easy prey items.
Right.
And if you've ever seen periodical cicadas, ever worked with them, they don't really try to get away. They're not evasive. They don't do any of that kind of stuff. So if you're out there and you're a predator looking for something to eat, they're pretty much the first thing on the menu.
Wow.
So there is a bit of research, and we've sort of talked about the detailed, some of those references on our website. a bit of research showing is a relaxation of predation on the other insect species that are out in those times.
So because of the cicadas, might we see an explosion of mosquitoes and other pest insects that might cause more problems when the cicadas are present?
Yeah, possibly, though, I think that the things that are preying on mosquitoes are probably not the same sorts of things that are generally preying on cicadas, just because the size and value difference.
Yeah. Is there anything about the presence of the cicadas, because this is a cyclical occurrence, in your research, are you concerned that people try to treat this, they want to kill them or, extricate them from their gardens? What do you hope people are not doing to get
So you have to keep in mind a couple of things. First of all, these are rare and they are special.
Yeah.
There are probably 5,000 or 6,000 species of cicadas on the planet, and fewer than 10 do anything like this.
Right.
And of those 10, 7 are found right here in the eastern U.S. So this is a rare thing. These species are old. They have been associated with these trees for millions of years. So this is something that they have sorted out ecologically. The cicadas are not destroying the forests or anything like that. This is an old association. They're a natural part of the ecosystem. And so really the thing to do is to sit back and appreciate it for what it is. It's just one of those things like an eclipse that happens in our environment.
Yeah.
It's probably a mistake to go out there and try to kill them all, because there isn't any reasonable method of doing that. And what are you left with anyways once you do that? To actually kill them with chemicals, you'd have to put down so much chemical, you'd kill everything else in the process.
Kill everything. And it is interesting to think that when you talk about them being associated with trees for millions of years, cicadas were present when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. I mean, it's fascinating to have something that emerges in this cyclical pattern.
But a lot of these species are pretty old. And in New England here, at least, the interesting thing about that is that our ecosystems and habitats are not very old. All of this was glaciated. Long Island and Cape Cod, they're glacial products of glaciation. So these have spent other times in other places in glacial refugia during the glacial maximum. They predate the glacial periods.
Right. So, well, the ospreys and the birds at the Cape and Long Island are about to have some great hors d'oeuvres, right?
Yeah, and that's a bit of a worry. A lot of those populations seem to be declining. So one of the other things about this is that they're a little bit like passenger pigeons. And if you know the story of passenger pigeons, the most common bird in North America used to be passenger pigeons. The skies would be darkened with their flocks. They seemed to be inexhaustible, but it's the kind of a species that functions a lot like the periodical cicadas. There is a threshold density, and if you push the populations below that density, they crash.
Wow.
And we have documented a few examples of periodical cicada, either their broods or their populations going extinct. And the ones on Long Island have really been declining over the past couple of emergences, and the ones on the Cape are kind of heading that direction as well. So we do watch these emergences with a bit of apprehension. They are something special. They are something to be treasured, and they're more fragile than you think.
Yeah. So it'll be a rare occurrence to see these cicadas and hear them as they emerge in the Northeast next year. Professor John Cooley, thanks so much for sharing all of your expertise with us, and we'll check back in once they've emerged. Thank you.
Thank you.